Nathaniel Carson's hands shook as he stared at the woman bleeding in his snow. She'd collapsed 20 feet from his gate, one arm reaching toward his house like it was salvation itself. He should have left her there. Should have ridden for the doctor and let someone else deal with whatever trouble she'd brought to his land. But her lips were moving, forming words he couldn't hear over the wind, and against every instinct that had kept him alive these 10 years. Nate dropped to his knees beside her and did the one thing he'd sworn he'd never do again. He let himself care whether a stranger lived or died. Before we begin, if you're settling in for this journey, hit that subscribe button and stay with me until the end. Drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Now let's go back to where it all started. Shouts. The Montana Territory in February 1878 didn't forgive mistakes. It buried them under 6 feet of snow and pretended they'd never existed. Nathaniel Carson had made his peace with that 10 years ago. He was mending the south fence when he saw her, a dark shape against the white landscape, moving wrong. Not walking, stumbling, falling, getting up, falling again. Nate's first thought was drunk. His second was dying. He was 100 yards out when she went down the last time and didn't get back up. Christ. The word cracked the silence he'd kept all morning. His gelding sensed urgency and moved faster through the deep snow. When Nate reached her, she was face down, one arm stretched toward his property like she'd been crawling. He dismounted and turned her over. Young, maybe 30. Thin enough that he could see her collarbones through her torn dress. Her lips were blue, her skin gray-white, but her chest was moving. Shallow breaths that fogged the air between them. Blood matted her dark hair on one side. Fresh blood still red against the snow. "Ma'am?" He touched her shoulder. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" Her eyes opened. Brown, he noted distantly. Dark brown and unfocused. "Mr. Carson." Her voice was barely a whisper. That stopped him cold. "You know my name." She tried to sit up, failed. "I came. Like the letter said. I'm Abigail. Abigail Mitchell. You're..." She coughed and more blood appeared at her hairline. "Your bride." Nate's jaw locked. "I didn't send for any bride." "But the letter..." Panic flashed across her face. "The letter from the agency. It had your name, your ranch. It said, I don't care what it said. I never wrote to any agency." She stared at him, and he watched something die in her eyes. Not surprise. She'd known. Somewhere deep down, she'd known this was too good to be real. "I see." Her voice went flat, empty. "Then I apologize for the intrusion, Mr. Carson. If you could just point me toward town, I'll..." "Town's 8 miles. You've got a head wound and you're half frozen. You won't make it a quarter mile." "That's not your concern." "It is when you die on my property." Nate slid his arms under her, lifting. She weighed nothing. "We'll get you warm patch up that head, and when the weather clears, I'll drive you to Millwater myself." "I don't need charity." "Good. I'm not offering it. I'm keeping a woman from freezing to death, which is basic human decency, not kindness." He felt her go rigid in his arms. Pride he recognized, the kind that kept you standing when everything else said to fall. "Just tonight," she said. "Just tonight." He agreed and knew it for the lie it was even as he spoke it. The house hadn't seen the woman in 10 years. Nate could tell she noticed immediately the way her eyes scanned the bare walls, the empty windows, the single chair by the fire. A house stripped of everything that made it a home. He set her in that chair, the only one he owned, and built up the fire. "You're bleeding on my floor." She touched her head, and her fingers came away red. "I'm sorry. I'll clean." "Sit still." He moved to the basin, pumped water, grabbed the cleanest rag he could find. When he turned back, she was trying to stand. "I said sit." "You said you weren't offering charity." "I'm not. I'm stopping blood from getting on my furniture. Now sit down before you fall down." She sat, but her spine stayed straight, her chin up. Nate knelt beside the chair and parted her hair carefully. The wound was ugly, a gash above her left temple, still bleeding freely, but shallow. Scalp wounds always looked worse than they were. What happened? I fell. Try again. Her hands clenched on the chair arms. I was robbed. On the road from Millwater. 2 men. They took my bag. My money, everything I had left. When I fought back, one of them hit me with something. I don't remember what. When I woke up, they were gone, and I was alone in the snow. Nate's hand stilled on the rag. You walked from the main road. I saw smoke from your chimney. Thought if I could just reach the house. She stopped. I didn't know you hadn't sent for me. I thought I was coming home. Something twisted in Nate's chest. He ignored it and focused on cleaning the wound. She didn't flinch when he pressed the rag to the gash. Didn't make a sound. Just sat there like she'd learned a long time ago that showing pain only made things worse. You'll need stitches. I can do it myself, if you have needle and thread. You can't see the back of your own head. Then tell me how, and I'll manage. Nate sat back on his heels and really looked at her. You always this stubborn? Only when I'm trying not to be a burden. She met his eyes. You didn't ask for me to show up here, Mr. Carson. The least I can do is not make more work for you. Little late for that. You're already bleeding on my chair. Almost, he saw her mouth twitch. Then I suppose the damage is done. He stood and retrieved his sewing kit. Basic supplies, the kind a man kept when he lived alone and couldn't afford to ride for help every time something needed fixing, including himself. This is going to hurt. Everything hurts. This won't be different. He threaded the needle and moved behind her chair. Her hair was matted with blood and snowmelt, but when he pushed it aside, he saw the fine bones of her neck, the small scars that dotted her shoulders. Old scars. The kind that came from hard living and harder choices. The first stitch made her hands grip the chair. The second made her breathing change. By the third, he could see her knuckles going white. Talk to me, Nate said. Helps with the pain. What do you want me to say? Tell me about the letter. She was quiet while he made 2 more stitches. Then, I was working in a boarding house in Denver. The owner's son had ideas about what I owed him for room and board. When he cornered me in the laundry, I hit him with a pressing iron. Broke his nose. His mother threw me out that night. Nate tied off a stitch. Good. Good. That you hit him. Men like that don't learn unless someone teaches them. Another silence. He could feel her reassessing him, trying to figure out what kind of man he was. I saw an advertisement for a mail-order bride agency, she continued. They said they matched women with good men out west, men who wanted wives and were willing to pay for passage. I had $30 saved. They took $25 for processing fees. Said the rest would get me to Montana Territory and my new husband. Let me guess, the husband paid for everything else. That's what they told me. They showed me your letter, said you were a widower rancher looking for a capable woman. The letter talked about the land, the work, the life we might build together. Her voice cracked. It all seemed real. Nate finished the last stitch and tied it off. Someone's running a con, taking money from desperate women and sending them to addresses that don't exist or to men who never asked for them. I know that now. He moved around to face her. The stitches were neat, clean. They'd hold. You got a family back in Denver? Someone I can wire? No. The word was flat, final. My husband died in a mine collapse 3 years ago. No children, no family, no one who'd notice I was gone. Friends. Mr. Carson, when you're a widow with no money and no prospects, you don't have friends. You have people who tolerate you as long as you're useful. She stood swayed slightly, which is why I need to ask you something and I need you to be honest. Go ahead. Is there work in Millwater, real work, not? She stopped. Not the kind of work desperate women usually end up doing. Nate understood what she wasn't saying. There's a dress shop. Woman who runs it is always looking for seamstresses. And the hotel needs kitchen help. Would they hire a woman with nothing? No references, no money, not even a change of clothes? He wanted to lie. Wanted to tell her it would be fine, that someone would take a chance on her. But they both knew better. Probably not. She nodded like she'd expected that. Then I have a proposition for you, Mr. Carson. I'm listening. You said this house could use work. I can see it needs cleaning, mending, proper meals. You need help. I need wages, and a place to stay that isn't... She gestured vaguely. Whatever options are available to women like me. So I'm offering you a business arrangement. I'll work for you. Keep house cook whatever you need. You pay me fair wages and give me room and board. When I've saved enough to get back on my feet, I'll leave. No obligations, no expectations, just honest work. Nate stared at her. You understand how that would look. A woman living here with me. People will talk regardless. At least this way, I'm not starving while they do it. And when you leave, when you decide this arrangement isn't working, then I leave. That's the whole point, Mr. Carson. I'm not asking for forever. I'm asking for a chance. He should say no. Should put her in the spare room tonight, drive her to town tomorrow, give her some money, and let her figure it out. That was the smart thing, the safe thing. But Abigail Mitchell stood in his empty house with fresh stitches in her scalp and blood drying on her dress, and she wasn't asking to be saved. She was asking to be hired. Wages are $40 a month plus room and board, he heard himself say. You get Sundays off. Door to your room locks from the inside. This is a business arrangement like you said, nothing more. Something crossed her face. Relief maybe, or hope. Agreed. You can start tomorrow. Tonight you rest, eat something, get warm. We'll figure out the details in the morning. Mr. Carson. Nate. If you're working for me, you can use my name. Nate. She tested it. Thank you. I know you didn't ask for this. Neither did you. He moved toward the kitchen. Now sit down before you fall down. I'll make us something to eat. The stew was basic. Venison, potatoes, carrots, onions. The kind of meal Nate had been making for himself for 10 years, functional but joyless. Abigail ate like she hadn't seen food in days, which he realized she probably hadn't. When did you last eat? She swallowed. Yesterday morning. Some bread. The men who robbed me took everything else. Nate refilled her bowl without asking. They ate in silence. Not comfortable, but not hostile either. The silence of two people who'd learned that talking didn't always help. When she finished, she stood and began clearing the table. Leave it. But... You just walked 8 miles in a blizzard with a head wound. The dishes can wait. I need to earn my keep. You start earning tomorrow. Tonight you're recovering. He gestured toward the hallway. Spare room is through there. Clean sheets on the bed. Basin and pitcher for washing. Door locks. She looked at him for a long moment. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? I don't know. Someone crueler maybe. Or someone who'd take advantage. I'm not cruel and I'm not a saint. I'm just a man who's tired of watching people suffer when I can do something about it. He turned away. Get some rest, Abigail. Morning comes early on a ranch. He heard her footsteps moving down the hall. Heard the door close. Heard the lock click. Only then did Nate allow himself to sink into his chair and wonder what the hell he'd just done. He couldn't sleep. Nate lay in his bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settle. And listening, though he tried not to, for sounds from the spare room. A woman in his house. The first since he cut that thought off before it could finish. Margaret and little James had been gone 10 years. 10 years since the fire that took them both while Nate was in town getting supplies. 10 years since he'd come home to find his house burning and his family already dead. He'd built this new house on the same land. Built it alone, deliberately, empty, a monument to the life he'd lost. No curtains, no rugs, no photographs. Nothing that could burn. Nothing that could hurt. And now, Abigail Mitchell was sleeping in his spare room, and for the first time in a decade, the house didn't feel like a tomb. That terrified him more than the fire ever had. Morning came gray and cold. Nate was already at the stove when he heard her door open. She appeared in the kitchen doorway, and he noticed she'd done her best to clean up. Her dress was still stained, but she'd washed her face and hands, tried to fix her hair around the stitches. "Morning?" "Morning." She looked at the coffee he was making. "I can do that. I've been making my own coffee for 10 years. I think I can manage one more day. But I'm supposed to." "Abigail." He turned to face her. "You start working when you're strong enough to work. Right now you look like you're about to fall over." "I'm fine." "You're pale as milk, and you're favoring your left side. What else hurts?" She hesitated. "Ribs, from when I fell. But they're not broken." "How do you know?" "Because I've had broken ribs before. These are just bruised." Nate felt that familiar twist again. "Sit down, eat. Then we'll talk about what you can handle." She sat, but reluctantly, like accepting care was admitting weakness. He put food in front of her: eggs, bacon bread. Watched her eat with the same desperate efficiency as last night. "Tell me about your husband." The question seemed to surprise her. "Why?" "Because you're living in my house now. I'd like to know who you are." Abigail set down her fork. "His name was Thomas. We married young. I was 18. He was 20. He worked in the mines. It was hard work, dangerous work, but it paid steady. We had plans. Save enough money, buy a little house, maybe start a family." She paused. Then there was a collapse. He and 14 other men died. The mine owner gave us $50 compensation and told us we were lucky to get that much. $50 for a man's life. $50 for a poor man's life. Rich men get monuments. Poor men get forgotten. Nate poured coffee for both of them. "What did you do after?" "What I had to. Worked as a washerwoman, then a maid, then at the boarding house. Each job paid less than the last. Each one treated me worse." She wrapped her hands around the coffee cup. "The landlady's son thought I should be grateful for his attention. Thought because I was a widow with no prospects I didn't have the right to say no. But you did say no." "I did, and I paid for it." She met his eyes. "That's when I saw the advertisement. I thought maybe I could have something different, something honest. A partnership with a man who'd chosen me even if it was just from a letter. And instead you got me. Instead, I got someone who didn't ask for me, didn't want me, but helped me anyway." She took a sip of coffee. "I'm not sure which is worse, being chosen for the wrong reasons or not being chosen at all." Nate understood that feeling better than she knew. The first week was careful negotiation. Abigail worked despite his protests. Started with small things, washing dishes, sweeping floors. Nate would come in from the morning chores to find bread, baking coffee. Hot the house warmer somehow. "You're supposed to be resting." "I rested enough. I need to work." "Your stitches are healing fine. Stop hovering, Nate." She'd started using his name. He noticed that. Liked it more than he should. They developed a rhythm. He'd work the ranch during the day while she tackled the house. Evenings they'd eat together, talking in short bursts about practical things. The weather, the livestock, what supplies they needed from town. Never anything deeper. Never anything personal. Until the night she asked about the empty rooms. "You have space for a family here." Nate's hand stopped halfway to his coffee cup. "Used to have a family." What happened? He could have shut her down. Could have told her it was none of her business. Instead, he found himself talking. "I was married. Had a son. James. He was 3. The words came rough, unused. 10 years ago, I went to town for supplies. Gone maybe 4 hours. When I came back..." He stopped, started again. "Fire started in the kitchen. Spread fast. My wife tried to get James out, but the smoke— Nate. Abigail's voice was soft. You don't have to— They died in the hall, 10 feet from the door. If I'd been here, if I hadn't gone to town, if I'd— Stop. She leaned forward. You can't live in if. Trust me. I've tried. You don't understand. Don't I? I spent 3 years thinking if I'd made Thomas stay home that day, if I'd convinced him to find different work, if I'd just— She shook her head. Guilt will eat you alive if you let it, and it won't bring them back. Nate stared into his coffee. I built this house on the same land. Thought if I made it empty enough, if I didn't have anything to lose, it wouldn't hurt anymore. Did it work? No. It just made me empty too. They sat in silence. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft and persistent. My husband used to say something, Abigail said quietly. He'd say, the mind doesn't care if you're scared. It just cares if you show up. I think life's like that. It doesn't care if you're broken. It just keeps happening. So we keep showing up. We keep showing up. Something shifted between them that night. Some wall came down. Not completely, they were both too damaged for that, but enough. By the second week, the house had changed. Curtains appeared on the windows, simple fabric Abigail had found in town. Nate had driven her there himself, given her money from her wages to buy supplies. She'd been careful, frugal, buying only what was necessary. But the curtains transformed the place, made it warmer, softer. You didn't have to do that. The morning sun was blinding. This is practical. Practical. He almost smiled. Is that what we're calling it? Unless you want to admit your house was depressing. My house was functional. Your house was a prison. She tied back one curtain. Now it's just sad. Give me another few weeks, and I'll get it up to merely unfortunate. He did smile then. Couldn't help it. That night, working on Mending by Lamplight, Abigail brought up the agency. Do you think there are other women like me? Probably. Someone should stop them. The agency, I mean. Someone should— She set down her needle. I should write letters. To the newspapers, to the authorities. Tell them what happened. They might not listen. They might not, but I have to try. She looked at him. I spent 3 years being powerless, Nate. I'm tired of it. Then write your letters. I'll help however I can. So, the third week brought trouble. Nate was in town getting feed when he ran into Thomas Brennan, owner of the Silver Creek Saloon, and the closest thing Nate had to a friend. Heard you got yourself a housekeeper. News travels. News travels faster when it's interesting. Tom leaned against the counter. Woman living alone with you. People are talking. Let them talk. Nate. Tom's voice dropped. You know how this works. Woman with no family, no references, living with a single man. They're saying she's your mistress. Or worse. What's worse? That you're taking advantage, that she's got no choice. Nate felt his jaw lock. Abigail has plenty of choices. She's working for wages. That what you tell yourself? That's what she tells me. Nate met his friend's eyes. She needed work. I needed help. It's a business arrangement. And if people don't see it that way, then people can go to hell. Tom sighed. Just be careful. For her sake, if not yours. Woman in her position, reputation's all she's got. Nate brought it up that night over dinner. People in town are talking. Abigail didn't look surprised. About me living here. About what it looks like. And what does it look like? Like I'm taking advantage of a desperate woman. She set down her fork carefully. Are you? No. Then what do I care what they think? Your reputation. My reputation. She laughed bitter. Nate, I'm a widow who traveled 1,000 miles to marry a stranger based on a forged letter. My reputation was gone before I got here. At least this way I'm eating regularly, and I have a roof over my head. Still nothing. She stood. I know what I agreed to. I know what this is. And if small-minded people want to think the worst, That's their problem, not mine. It becomes your problem when they won't hire you, when they won't speak to you, when you want to leave here and start fresh somewhere, and no one will give you a chance because of what they think happened in this house. Then I'll go somewhere they don't know me. There's nowhere they don't know you. Gossip follows. Abigail crossed her arms. What do you want me to do? Nate. Leave. Is that what this is about? No. The word came too fast. Too sharp. No, He stopped. Started over. I don't want you to stay because you have no other choice. And I don't want people thinking I'm the kind of man who'd trap you here. You're not trapping me. I'm choosing to stay. For how long? I don't know. Does it matter? It shouldn't. It was a business arrangement. But Nate found himself caring more than he should about the answer. No, he lied. It doesn't matter. But they both knew it did. The morning after their conversation, Nate found Abigail at the kitchen table with paper and pen writing furiously. Started already. Can't sleep anyway. She didn't look up. Might as well do something useful. He poured himself coffee and sat across from her. What are you writing? Letter to the Denver Post. Figured if I'm going to expose the agency, might as well start with the biggest paper I know. She paused, pen hovering. How do you spell fraudulent? Fraudulent. Thanks. She kept writing, her hand moving fast across the page. I'm telling them everything. The fake letters, the stolen money. How many women might be out there right now traveling to men who never sent for them? Nate watched her work. There was something fierce in her concentration, something that reminded him of a cornered animal that had finally decided to fight back. You think they'll print it? I think they'll ignore it. But I have to try. She set down the pen and flexed her fingers. My mother used to say silence is complicity. If I know what's happening and I don't speak up, I'm part of the problem. Your mother sounds like she was a smart woman. She was. Died when I was 16. Fever took her in 3 days. Abigail picked up the pen again. Before she died, she told me never to make myself small for anyone. Said women spend too much time apologizing for taking up space in the world. You don't apologize much. I'm trying not to. It's harder than it sounds. They sat in companionable silence while she finished the letter. When she sealed it, she looked at him directly. Will you mail this for me when you go to town? I will. But Abigail, I know what you're going to say, that it might not help, that I might make enemies, that it's dangerous to speak out. She stood. But staying silent hasn't kept me safe so far. Maybe being loud will work better. Nate thought about that all morning while he worked. About the difference between safety and surrender. About how Abigail refused to accept that those were her only options. She reminded him of Margaret in that way. His wife had been fierce too. Refused to back down when she thought something was wrong. It was one of the things he'd loved most about her, and one of the things that made losing her hurt so damn much. By midday, the snow had started again. Heavy, wet flakes that meant a real storm was coming. Nate came in early to secure the barn and check supplies. Abigail was cooking something that smelled better than anything he'd made in 10 years. What is that? Chicken stew. Found some dried herbs in your cupboard that were probably older than me, but they'll work. She stirred the pot. Storm's coming. I noticed. Bad one. Bad enough. We'll be snowed in for a few days at least. She nodded, didn't seem bothered. Good thing I made extra bread yesterday. Nate washed up at the basin and watched her work. She moved around the kitchen with efficiency born of years doing this kind of labor. But there was something different now. She wasn't working for someone else. She was working for herself in a space that was becoming hers too. Abigail. Thank you. She turned surprised. For what? For the bread, the stew, the curtains, he gestured vaguely. For making this place feel less empty. Something soft crossed her face. You're welcome. They ate dinner while the wind picked up outside. The storm hit just after dark, howling around the house with a fury that made the windows rattle. Sounds angry, Abigail said. Montana winters usually are. Does it ever scare you? Being out here alone when the storms come? Nate thought about that. Used to. After the fire, every storm felt like it was coming to take something else. But I got used to it. Or maybe I just stopped caring whether it took me to. And now it's just weather. But that wasn't quite true anymore. Now there was someone else in the house. Someone who'd die if the storm broke through or the fire went out. Someone who made him remember what it felt like to have something to protect. The realization unsettled him more than the storm ever could. That night past midnight, Nate woke to a sound he couldn't place. He lay still listening. There it was again, a soft thump from the main room. He pulled on his pants and went to investigate. Abigail was kneeling by the fireplace feeding wood into the dying flames. She'd wrapped a blanket around her shoulders, but he could see she was shivering. Fire was going out, she said without turning around. Didn't want the house to get cold. That's my job. You were sleeping. I was awake. Can't sleep. Not well. She sat back watching the flames catch. Storms make me nervous. After Thomas died, I spent a winter in a room with walls so thin you could see through the cracks. Every storm I'd wake up, sure the roof was going to blow off. Nate grabbed another blanket from his room and sat in the chair. It's solid. This house will hold. I know that up here. She tapped her head. But knowing and believing are different things. Tell me about it. So they sat there while the storm raged outside. Abigail in her blanket on the floor, Nate in his chair, both of them watching the fire like it held answers. Can I ask you something? Abigail's voice was quiet. Go ahead. Why did you really let me stay? And don't say it was just decent. You could have given me money and sent me to town. That would have been decent too. Nate was quiet for a long time. You remind me of her, my wife, not in looks or anything like that, but he searched for the word. In steel. Margaret had this way of refusing to accept that things couldn't change. If something was wrong, she'd fix it. If someone said no, she'd find another way. She didn't know how to quit. And I remind you of that. You showed up at my gate half dead and still tried to negotiate wages. Yeah, you remind me of that. Abigail pulled the blanket tighter. Is that good or bad? I don't know yet. They fell into silence again. Outside, the wind screamed. Nate, yeah. I'm glad I ended up here. Even if it was a mistake. Even if someone lied to get me here. I'm glad. Something in his chest tightened. Me too. The storm lasted 3 days. 3 days of being trapped in the house together, learning each other's rhythms. Nate discovered that Abigail hummed while she worked, that she read slowly, mouthing the words. That she could beat him at cards, but was terrible at chess. Abigail learned that Nate woke before dawn every day without fail. That he carved small pieces of wood when he needed to think. That he said more with silence than most people said with words. On the second day, cabin fever set in. I need to check the barn. Nate, you checked 2 hours ago. Animals need... The animals are fine. You're just going stir-crazy. Abigail looked up from her mending. Sit down. Read something. Relax. I don't relax. I've noticed. It's exhausting watching you. He stopped pacing. I'm exhausting. Yes, you move around this house like you're afraid if you sit still too long something bad will happen. She set down her needle. Nothing bad is going to happen, Nate. The storm will pass. The animals will be fine. And you wearing a hole in the floor won't make it go faster. I've been alone 10 years. I'm not used to... He gestured at her. This. Talking to another human being. Having someone notice. Abigail's expression softened. I notice a lot of things. Like how you always serve me food before you take any. How you check the locks on my door every night to make sure they work. How you turn away when I'm changing the bandage on my head because you're trying to give me privacy even though we're in the same room. You noticed that. I notice everything. It's how you survive when you've got nothing. She picked up her mending again. You're a good man, Nate Carson. You just forgot how to let anyone see it. He didn't know what to say to that. So he sat down in his chair and picked up a piece of wood to carve, and they spent the rest of the afternoon in comfortable silence. By the third day, the storm had blown itself out. Nate spent the morning digging paths to the barn and the well. When he came back in frozen and exhausted, Abigail had hot coffee waiting. You're going to town tomorrow. Soon as the roads are passable. Why? I want to come with you. He looked at her surprised. You sure? Last time you went to town, people stared. Let them stare. I need to mail my letters, and I want to look for work. Real work, in addition to what I'm doing here. Abigail, you don't need... Yes, I do. Nate, you're paying me fair wages, and I'm grateful. But I need to know I can stand on my own, that I'm not dependent on your kindness. She met his eyes. You understand that, don't you? He did. Better than she knew. We'll go tomorrow. Millwater looked different under fresh snow, cleaner, quieter. But the stairs were the same. Nate felt them the moment he helped Abigail down from the wagon. Saw the women whispering behind gloved hands. Saw the men looking away disapproving. Ignore them, he said quietly. I am. But he saw her spine straighten, her chin lift. Armor going up. They went to the post office first. Abigail mailed her letters, 3 of them now, to different newspapers. The postmaster took her money without comment, but his eyes said plenty. Then the general store for supplies. Tom Brennan was there talking to the owner. Nate, Miss Mitchell. Tom tipped his hat. Tom. Storm treat you all right? Well enough. Tom's gaze moved between them. Must have been cozy. 3 days snowed in together. Nate felt his jaw tighten. It was fine. I bet it was. Abigail stepped forward. Mr. Brennan, I'm looking for work. Do you know anyone in town who might need help? I can sew, cook, clean, keep books if needed. Tom looked uncomfortable. Miss Mitchell, I don't think... You don't think anyone will hire me because I'm living with Nate? She said it flat, matter of fact. Is that what you were going to say? I was going to say, the dress shop already has all the help it needs. What about the hotel? They're not hiring right now. The restaurant? Miss Mitchell. Tom's voice was gentle but firm. No one's going to hire you. Not while you're living out at Nate's place unchaperoned. That's just the way it is. Abigail's face went very still. I see. For what it's worth, I don't think you're doing anything wrong. But other people can go to hell, Nate said. Nate. Abigail touched his arm. It's fine. Let's just get our supplies and go. They loaded the wagon in silence. Nate could feel rage building in his chest, hot and familiar. The same rage he'd felt when the mine owner handed him $50 and called it compensation for a man's life. The same rage that came from watching people suffer because of rules that didn't make sense. I'm sorry, he said when they were clear of town. It's not your fault. Still, you shouldn't be punished for what? For needing help, for accepting work. She shook her head. I'm not ashamed of our arrangement, Nate, and I won't pretend to be just to make small-minded people comfortable. You say that now, but when no one will speak to you when you can't find work anywhere, then I'll figure something else out. I always do. But that night Nate heard her crying. He stood outside her door, hand raised to knock, frozen with uncertainty. The sound was muffled, like she was trying to hide it, like she didn't want him to know she was breaking. He knocked anyway. Abigail. The crying stopped immediately. I'm fine. You're crying. I'm fine, she repeated, but her voice cracked. Can I come in? Silence. Then the sound of the lock turning. She was sitting on the bed, still dressed, her face blotchy and wet. She'd been crying hard. Nate sat beside her, careful to leave space between them. "Talk to me. I thought I could do this. I thought I could start over, make something of myself. But everywhere I go it's the same. I'm either invisible or I'm being judged. There's no in between." She wiped her eyes roughly. "I'm so tired of fighting Nate, so tired of having to prove I'm worth something." "You are worth something. To you, maybe, because you're too decent to think otherwise. But to the rest of the world," she laughed bitterly, "I'm just another desperate widow who should be grateful for whatever scraps get thrown her way." "That's not true. Isn't it? Name one person in Millwater who'd give me a fair chance. One person who doesn't think I'm either your mistress or your charity case." Nate couldn't, and that made him angrier than anything else. "Then to hell with Millwater. To hell with all of them." "Easy for you to say. You can leave. You have options. I have—" She gestured helplessly. "I have nothing. No family. No references, nowhere to go. Just this room and the wages you pay me out of kindness." "It's not kindness." "Then what is it?" The question hung between them. Nate looked at her, really looked at her. At the woman who'd walked 8 miles through a blizzard with a head wound, who'd negotiated wages while bleeding on his floor, who refused to be invisible even when the world demanded it. "It's respect," he said finally. "You work hard. You don't complain. You've turned this house into something that feels like a home again. That's worth more than $40 a month. You're saying that to make me feel better." "I'm saying it because it's true." He stood. "And tomorrow we're going back to town. You're going to mail more letters. You're going to walk down that street with your head up. And anyone who has a problem with it can answer to me." "Nate, I mean it, Abigail. I've spent 10 years not caring what people think. I'm not about to start now." Something shifted in her expression. "Why are you doing this, really?" "Because you remind me what it feels like to care about something besides surviving," he wanted to say. "Because having you here makes me remember I'm alive, not just breathing." "Because someone should," he said instead. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she stood and did something that surprised them both. She hugged him. It was brief, awkward. Neither of them knew quite how to stand or where to put their arms. But for those few seconds, Nate felt the warmth of another human being against him for the first time in a decade. When she pulled back, her eyes were dry. "Thank you. Get some sleep. Tomorrow, we fight back." The next morning, they returned to Millwater with a plan. Abigail had written 2 more letters overnight, one to the territorial governor, one to a women's advocacy group in Chicago. She'd also drafted a notice for the newspaper. "I want to place an advertisement," she told the newspaper editor. "For what? Seamstress services, mending alterations, new dresses. I'll work from Mr. Carson's ranch." The editor looked skeptical. "Miss Mitchell, I'm not sure anyone will." "Then they won't. But I'm placing the advertisement anyway." The man took her money reluctantly. They went to the dress shop next. The owner, Mrs. Patricia Hayes, was a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who ran the only respectable clothing establishment in town. "I'm not hiring," she said before Abigail could speak. "I'm not asking for a job. I'm offering a partnership." That got her attention. "What kind of partnership?" "You have more work than you can handle. I can see at the pile of mending in the corner the fabric bolts that haven't been sorted. I'm offering to take your overflow. You send customers to me for alterations and mending. I do the work, charge them directly, and give you a commission for the referral." Mrs. Hayes studied her. "Why would I do that?" "Because you're losing business by turning people away. This way you keep the customers happy and make money without doing the work yourself. And why would customers come to you?" A woman living alone with a man unchaperoned. Abigail didn't flinch. "Because I'm good at what I do, and I charge fair prices. And because some people care more about getting their clothes fixed than about gossip." Mrs. Hayes was silent for a long moment. Then, "Bring me samples of your work. If it's good enough, we'll talk." It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either. Walking back to the wagon, Abigail was quiet. "You all right?" "I just negotiated a business arrangement like I had the right to." She looked at him, something fierce in her eyes. "I forgot what that felt like." "You always had the right." Having the right and being able to use it are different things. She climbed into the wagon. "But I'm learning, slowly." On the ride home, she asked him something she'd been avoiding. "Why didn't you ever remarry after your wife died?" Nate kept his eyes on the road. "Didn't see the point." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I have." "Nate." He sighed. "Because I couldn't. Because every woman I met I'd compare her to Margaret. Because I was so angry at God for taking her that I couldn't imagine letting anyone else close enough to lose." He paused. "And because I thought I didn't deserve another chance. That happiness was something that happened once, and if you lost it, you'd lost it forever." "Do you still think that—" "I don't know. Maybe." He glanced at her. "What about you?" "Why didn't you remarry after Thomas?" "No one asked. And the ones who did ask weren't looking for a wife. They were looking for—" She stopped. "Someone they could control." "Yes." They rode in silence for a while. Then Abigail said, "I think we're both afraid of the same thing." "What's that?" "That if we let ourselves want something good, it'll get taken away again." Nate had no answer to that. Because she was right. That night after dinner, Abigail showed him the samples she'd been working on. A shirt with careful embroidery, a dress with intricate beadwork, a quilt square with stitching so fine it looked like lace. "This is what you're taking to Mrs. Hayes, if it's good enough." "Abigail, this is better than anything in her shop." She looked pleased, despite herself. "You think so?" "I know so. Where did you learn to sew like this?" "My mother. She worked as a seamstress before she married. Said it was the one skill that could keep a woman fed no matter what happened." Abigail folded the samples carefully. "I just hope Mrs. Hayes agrees." 3 days later, Nate drove her back to town. Mrs. Hayes examined the samples in silence that stretched so long Abigail started to sweat. Finally, "You're hired. 20% commission on everything I send you. You provide your own materials and tools. We'll start with simple alterations and see how it goes." Abigail's face lit up. "Thank you, Mrs. Hayes. You won't regret this." "I'd better not. And Miss Mitchell, I don't care what you do in your personal life, but if your work is sloppy or late, we're done." "Understood." "Understood." Walking out of the shop, Abigail was shaking. "You all right?" "I just got work based on my skills, not despite my circumstances." "Do you know how rare that is?" Nate did. "You earned it." "We earned it. You drove me here. You stood beside me. You—" She stopped in the middle of the street. "Why are you doing all this, Nate, really?" "Because you're making me remember what it's like to hope," he thought. "Because you're proving that broken things can still be useful. Because you're the first person in 10 years who's made me want to be more than just functional." "Because you deserve a chance," he said. She looked at him like she was trying to see through to the truth. Then she smiled, the first real smile he'd seen from her. "Come on, let's get supplies and go home." "Home," she'd said. "Not your house or the ranch. Home." And for the first time in 10 years, that's what it felt like. The work from Mrs. Hayes started arriving within the week. Simple things at first: torn hems, loose buttons, a coat that needed taking in. Abigail worked on them at the kitchen table, while Nate did his accounts, both of them existing in a companionable silence that had become their evening routine. "This one's from the banker's wife," Abigail said, holding up a dress that probably cost more than she made in 3 months. "She actually requested me specifically. Word spreads fast. Especially when the work's good." She threaded her needle. "Mrs. Hayes sent a note. Says she's got more coming. Wants to know if I can handle a wedding dress." Nate looked up. "Can you—" "I've never made one. but I've altered enough to know how they're constructed. She met his eyes. Should I try? You asking my permission or my opinion? Your opinion. Then yes, try. Worst thing that happens is you learn something new. She smiled at that. When did you get so encouraging? When I met someone worth encouraging. The words hung between them heavier than he'd intended. Abigail's hands stilled on the fabric. Nate. I'm going to check the barn. He stood quickly, needing distance. Finish your work. Outside, the February cold bit through his coat. Nate stood in the snow, breathing hard, watching his breath fog the air. He was getting too comfortable, too attached. Abigail had been clear from the start this was temporary. She was saving money, building a reputation, preparing to leave. That was always the plan. So why did the thought of her going make his chest feel tight? When he came back inside an hour later, Abigail was still at the table. But she'd stopped sewing. You were gone a while. Needed to think. About what? About how I'm starting to care more than I should, he thought. About how this house is going to feel empty when you leave. About how I forgot what it's like to have someone to come home to. Nothing important. Liar. But she said it gently. Nate, we need to talk about what's happening here. Nothing's happening? Yes, it is. We both know it. She set down the dress. I see how you look at me sometimes. And She stopped, started over. I look at you the same way, and we can't keep pretending we don't. Nate's throat went dry. Abigail. Let me finish. She stood. I came here expecting nothing, planning to work, save money, and move on. But somewhere along the way, this stopped being just a job. This house stopped being just a place to stay. And you stopped being just my employer. What are we then? I don't know. Friends maybe, or something more. Something neither of us knows how to name. She moved closer. But I know I care whether you eat, whether you're warm, whether you're happy, and I think you care about the same things for me. I do. Then we need to decide what we're going to do about it. Nate felt panic rise in his chest. I can't, Abigail. I can't promise you anything. I buried my wife and son 10 years ago, and I swore I'd never put myself through that again. And you should want more than a broken man who doesn't know how to be anything but alone. Maybe I don't want more. Maybe I want exactly this. She reached for his hand. I'm not asking for promises, Nate. I'm not asking for forever. I'm just asking if we can stop pretending we're only business partners when we're clearly becoming something else. And when you leave, who says I'm leaving? You did. First day. You said when you'd saved enough. I know what I said. But Nate, I've saved enough to leave for 3 weeks now. I could have gone to Denver, started over somewhere fresh. But I didn't. Her voice softened. Because I don't want to leave. Because this feels like the first real home I've had since Thomas died. Because you... She stopped. Because I what? Because you see me. Not as a servant or a burden or something to use. You see me as a person, as someone worth listening to. And I haven't had that in so long I forgot what it felt like. Nate looked at their joined hands. Hers were small, scarred from needlework and hard labor. His were calloused, marked by years of ranch work. Two broken people holding on to each other in a house that used to be empty. I don't know how to do this, he said quietly. How to care about someone without being terrified of losing them. Then we figure it out together. We be scared together. She squeezed his hand. We try, Nate. That's all I'm asking. That we stop hiding and we try. He pulled his hand back, needing space to think. What if I can't? What if I try and it's not enough? Then at least we tried. At least we didn't spend the rest of our lives wondering what if. The rest of our lives. The phrase settled over him like snow. I need time. Disappointment crossed her face, but she nodded. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. But as she returned to her sewing, Nate wondered if time was really what he needed, or if he was just using it as an excuse to stay safe. The next week brought an unexpected visitor. Nate was working on the north fence when he saw a horse approaching. The rider was a woman middle-aged, dressed in expensive traveling clothes. She pulled up at the gate and looked around with obvious distaste. "Can I help you?" "I'm looking for Nathaniel Carson." "You found him." She dismounted with practiced ease. "My name is Margaret Hayes. I own the dress shop in Millwater." The banker's wife. The one who'd been whispering about Abigail. "What do you want?" "To speak with your housekeeper." "Is she available?" Nate's jaw tightened. "Depends on what you want to speak about." "That's between Miss Mitchell and myself. Anything concerning her concerns me." Mrs. Hayes raised an eyebrow. "How protective. How very improper." "I don't care much for propriety." Clearly, she looked past him toward the house. "Nevertheless, I need to speak with her. It's about business." Abigail appeared on the porch, having heard the voices. "Mrs. Hayes, this is unexpected." "Miss Mitchell, may we speak privately?" "Anything you need to say, you can say in front of Nate." Mrs. Hayes looked between them, something calculating in her expression. "Very well. I'm here to make you an offer. I need a full-time seamstress. Someone skilled enough to handle my wealthier clients. Patricia Hayes recommended you. Said your work is exceptional." Abigail's face showed surprise. "Patricia Hayes? But she doesn't care about gossip when there's money to be made. Neither do I." Mrs. Hayes named a salary that made Abigail's eyes widen. "Room and board included. You'd work in the shop, take on custom orders, and train any apprentices I hire. It's a legitimate position with legitimate pay." That's very generous." "It's business. You're talented. I need talent." So Hayes paused. "But you'd need to move to town, live in the room above the shop, maintain a proper reputation." There it was. The catch. Nate waited for Abigail to jump at the chance. This was everything she'd wanted: real work independence, escape from the gossip that came with living at his ranch. "I need to think about it." Mrs. Hayes looked annoyed. "It's a good offer, Miss Mitchell, better than you'll get anywhere else." "I know, and I appreciate it, but I can't give you an answer right now. You have 3 days. After that, I'll find someone else." Mrs. Hayes mounted her horse. "Think carefully. Opportunities like this don't come twice." They watched her ride away in silence. "You should take it," Nate said. "Is that what you want?" "It's not about what I want. It's about what's best for you. And you think leaving is what's best for me. I think having a real future is what's best for you, not being stuck out here with—" He gestured at himself. "With this." Abigail turned on him, angry now. "Stop doing that. Stop deciding what I need without asking me what I want. I'm trying to do the right thing. The right thing is letting me make my own choices, not pushing me away because you're scared." "I'm not scared." "You're terrified. I can see it every time you look at me. Every time we get close to something real, you find a reason to back away." She moved closer. "I asked you to try Nate, not to sabotage every chance we have before it even starts." "This isn't sabotage. This is me being practical. You deserve more than what? Than a good man who treats me with respect, than a home where I'm valued, than someone who sees me as an equal instead of property." Her voice rose. "Because that's what you're offering Nate. That's what this is. And you're so convinced you don't deserve happiness that you're willing to throw it away before you even taste it." "My wife and son died because I wasn't there. Because I went to town for supplies and left them alone, and they burned to death while I was buying flour." The words came out harsh, raw. "That's who you're defending. A man who couldn't even keep his family safe. That's who you think you are. A man who failed." Abigail's eyes filled with tears. "Nate, that fire wasn't your fault. You didn't light it. You didn't leave them to die. You were living your life doing normal things, and tragedy struck. That's not failure. That's just life being cruel." I should have been there. And if you had been, you'd be dead too. Then what, 3 graves instead of 2? Is that what would make you feel better? The question hit him like a fist. I don't know. Yes, you do. You know that Margaret wouldn't want you living like this, that your son wouldn't want you punishing yourself for surviving. You know it, Nate. You just won't admit it, because then you'd have to let go of the guilt, and the guilt is easier than the grief. She was right. God help him, she was right. I don't know how to let it go. Then don't. Not all at once. Just... She took his hand again. Just try. With me. Let me help you carry it instead of carrying it alone. Nate looked at her, this woman who'd shown up at his gate broken and desperate, and had somehow become the strongest person he knew. This woman who saw through all his armor to the terrified man underneath and still wanted to stay. What if I hurt you? You will, and I'll hurt you too. That's what people do. But Nate, we're already hurting by staying apart. At least if we're together, we can hurt less. He pulled her closer slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. Instead, she leaned into him, her head against his chest, her arms around his waist. They stood like that for a long time. 2 damaged people, holding each other up. I'm not taking the job, Abigail said finally. You should think about it. I have. And I'm staying here. With you. If you'll have me. It's not about having you. It's about... Nate. She pulled back to look at him. Do you want me to stay? The question was simple. The answer was complicated. But when he looked at her face, fierce and hopeful, and scared all at once, the truth came easier than he expected. Yes. Then that's settled? Mrs. Hayes will find someone else. Let her. I'll keep doing piecework. Build my own business. I don't need her shop to survive. Abigail smiled. I just need you to stop trying to save me from yourself. That night they sat together by the fire, not touching, but closer than before, the space between them charged with possibility. Tell me about James, Abigail said quietly. Nate's first instinct was to refuse. He never talked about his son. Couldn't without feeling like he was being torn apart. But Abigail was looking at him with such gentle patience that he found himself speaking. He looked like Margaret. Dark hair, dark eyes. But he had my stubbornness. From the time he could walk, he wanted to do everything himself. Wouldn't let me help with his boots. Wouldn't let Margaret feed him. Independent as hell. The memory made him smile despite the pain. He loved horses. Used to sneak out to the barn every morning just to watch them. He was too small to ride, but Margaret said when he turned 4 we'd teach him. He never got to 4. No, he was 3.5 when the fire happened. 3.5 years old and already acting like he owned the world. Abigail was quiet for a moment. What would he be now if he'd lived 13, almost 14? Nate's throat tightened. Old enough to help with the ranch. Old enough to have opinions about everything. Old enough to... He stopped. Old enough to tell you to stop grieving and start living. Yeah, probably. Then maybe you should listen to him. Nate looked at her. That easy? No, nothing about this is easy. But Nate, keeping yourself frozen in the past doesn't honor them. It just means the fire took 3 lives instead of 2. She was right. He'd been dead for 10 years, just kept walking around afterward. I'm afraid, he admitted, of caring about you, of losing you, of having to bury someone else I love. I'm afraid too, of trusting you, of believing this is real, of waking up one day and finding out it was all another lie. She turned to face him fully. But I'm more afraid of walking away and spending the rest of my life wondering what if. What if it works? What if it works? The fire crackled. Outside, wind rattled the windows. Inside, something shifted. Nate reached for her hand. I can't promise I won't be scared. I don't need promises, just honesty. then I'm honestly terrified. And I honestly want you to stay. And I honestly have no idea how to do this without breaking us both. Then we'll figure it out, together. Abigail squeezed his hand. That's what partners do. Partners. Not employer and employee, not just friends. Partners. The word settled into his chest like coming home. The next morning, Tom Brennan showed up at the ranch. Nate was surprised to see him. Tom rarely came out this far unless something was wrong. Need to talk to you. About what? Tom glanced at the house where Abigail was visible through the window. Privately. They walked to the barn. Tom waited until they were out of earshot. There's talk in town. About you and Miss Mitchell. There's always talk. This is different. Margaret Hayes is saying you're living in sin, that Miss Mitchell is your mistress, that you're taking advantage of a desperate woman. Nate's hands clenched. Margaret Hayes can... I know what she can do, but Nate, this isn't just gossip anymore. She's got the church ladies worked up. They're talking about having you both run out of town. On what grounds? Moral corruption, indecency. They don't need real grounds, just enough people agreeing that something's wrong. Nate felt rage building in his chest. Abigail works for me, that's all. Is it? Tom met his eyes. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like more. What it looks like and what it is are two different things. Not to them, they're not. Tom ran a hand through his hair. Look, I'm on your side, you know that. But this is getting ugly. If you care about her reputation, I care about her, period. Then marry her. The words hung in the cold air. What? Marry her, make it legal, then they can't say anything. Tom shrugged. It's the only way to shut them up. I'm not getting married to silence gossip. Then why would you get married? Nate opened his mouth, closed it, because the answer was complicated and simple at the same time. Exactly. Tom clapped him on the shoulder. Think about it, because if you don't do something, they're going to force your hand. And it won't be pretty. After Tom left, Nate stood in the barn for a long time. Marriage. He'd buried his first wife 10 years ago. Sworn he'd never go through that again. Never put himself in a position to lose someone he loved. But Abigail was already here, already under his skin, already someone he'd grieve if she left. So what was he protecting himself from? The pain he'd already invited in. He found her in the kitchen working on the wedding dress Mrs. Hayes had sent over. She looked up when he entered. Tom, leave. Yeah. What did he want? Nate sat down across from her. He wanted to warn me that people in town are trying to run us out. Says the only way to stop them is to get married. Abigail's hand stilled on the fabric. Oh. I told him I wasn't getting married just to silence gossip. Good. That would be a terrible reason. But it got me thinking. He took a breath. About us. About what we're doing here. About whether we're just pretending this is temporary when we both know it's not. Nate. Let me finish. I can't promise I won't be scared. Can't promise I'll be good at this. Can't promise I won't mess it up 6 different ways. He met her eyes. But I can promise I'll try. And I can promise that you matter to me more than anyone has in 10 years. And if you're willing to take a chance on a broken man who's still learning how to be alive, then... Yes. I haven't asked yet. Then ask. Nate stood and moved around the table, knelt beside her chair the way he had that first day when he was stitching her head wound. Abigail Mitchell, will you marry me? Not because of gossip or convenience, not because you have nowhere else to go, but because I want to build a life with you, a real one, and I want to stop being scared of what that means. Tears streamed down her face. Yes. God, yes. He kissed her then, his first real kiss in 10 years. Clumsy and uncertain, and absolutely perfect. When they broke apart, both breathless, Abigail laughed. We're really doing this. Unless you've changed your mind in the last 30 seconds. Not a chance. They sat there on the kitchen floor, holding each other, and Nate felt something he thought he'd never feel again. Hope. They decided to marry quickly, not because of the gossip, though, that certainly added pressure, but because waiting felt like giving fear another chance to talk them out of it. 2 weeks, Abigail said. That gives me time to finish this wedding dress I'm working on and make something simple for myself. You're making your own wedding dress? I'm a seamstress, Nate. Of course I'm making my own dress. She smiled. Besides, I can't afford anything fancy, and I don't need it. This isn't about the dress. What's it about? You and me. Finally admitting what we've been dancing around for months. Nate pulled her closer. We haven't been dancing. We've been stumbling. Then we'll stumble into marriage together. They told Tom first. He showed up the next day with a bottle of whiskey and a grin. About damn time. Didn't know you cared so much about my personal life, Nate said. I don't. But I care about you being happy. And she makes you happy. Tom poured 3 glasses, to stumbling into something good. They drank. The whiskey burned warm. You'll need witnesses, Tom said. I'll stand up for you. Miss Mitchell, you got anyone? Abigail shook her head. No family, no close friends. Just... She paused. Just me? Then I'll find you someone. Tom stood. There's a woman who runs the boarding house. Lost her husband last year. She's decent people. Doesn't judge. I'll ask her. After he left, Abigail was quiet. You all right? I was just thinking. My wedding to Thomas, my mother was there. His family, friends from the mine. There must have been 30 people crammed into that little church. She looked at Nate. And this time, it'll be just us and 2 witnesses. Doesn't that seem sad? Does it feel sad? She considered. No, it feels right. Like we're not performing for anyone, just making a promise to each other. Then that's all that matters. But that night, lying in bed, Nate thought about his first wedding. Margaret in a white dress her mother had saved for years, his army friends in their dress uniforms, the church full of people celebrating their future, a future that never came. He'd planned to marry Margaret in that same church, had written her about it in his letters, described the little house he'd build, the life they'd have. And then the telegram came, and all those plans turned to ash. Now he was planning another wedding, another future, and the fear that it would end the same way sat heavy on his chest. Stop thinking so loud. Nate turned to find Abigail in his doorway. They'd been keeping separate rooms, still maintaining some propriety, even though everyone assumed the worst anyway. Can't sleep. Can hear you worrying through the walls. She came in, sat on the edge of his bed. Talk to me. I'm scared I'm going to lose you. I know. I'm scared I'll fail you the way I failed them. You didn't fail them, Nate, but I know you think you did. She took his hand. So, let me ask you something. If you could go back knowing what you know now, would you choose not to marry Margaret? Not to have James? Would you trade those 3 years to avoid the pain? No. Then why are you trying to trade our future to avoid pain that might never come? Nate pulled her down beside him. When did you get so wise? When I survived 3 years of hell and came out the other side. She rested her head on his shoulder. I'm scared too. Every time you ride out, I worry you won't come back. Every time you're late, I think something's happened. But I'm choosing to be here anyway. Because the alternative is spending my life afraid to live. We're a mess. We're human. She kissed his cheek. And we're trying. That's more than most people can say. They fell asleep like that, fully clothed, holding each other. When Nate woke at dawn, Abigail was gone back to her own room to preserve appearances for nobody but themselves. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of preparation and worry, and moments of startling joy. Abigail worked on her dress in the evenings. Simple cream cotton, no lace or frills, just clean lines and careful stitching. It's beautiful, Nate said, watching her work. It's practical. It's you. She smiled at that. I suppose it is. Nate went to town to arrange things with the preacher. Reverend Matthews was an old man who'd been serving Millwater since before Montana was even a territory. Heard you were getting married. News travels. Always does in small towns. Matthews studied him. This the same woman who's been living at your place? She's been working for me, yes. And now you're marrying her. That's right. Matthews was quiet for a moment. Son, I don't care much for gossip, but I care about the people in my congregation. And I need to know this is real, that you're not marrying her just to silence talk. It's real. You love her. The question caught Nate off guard. He'd been so focused on fear and duty and doing the right thing that he hadn't stopped to name what he felt. Yes, he said, and realized it was true. I love her. Then I'll marry you. Saturday afternoon, if that suits. That suits fine. Walking back to the wagon, Nate felt something settle in his chest. He loved Abigail. When had that happened? When she showed up bleeding at his gate, when she negotiated wages while dying on his floor, when she started making curtains and bread and turning his house into a home. Or maybe it was the accumulation of 100 small moments. Her humming while she worked. The way she argued with him when she thought he was wrong. The fierce pride that kept her standing when everything said to fall. He'd loved Margaret with the intensity of youth, all passion and promise and certainty. He loved Abigail with the weariness of experience, knowing it could end, knowing it could hurt, choosing it anyway. When he got home, she was in the kitchen making dinner. He came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. Nate, I love you. She went still. What? I love you. I just realized it today and I thought you should know. She turned in his arms. You just realized? I'm slow about these things. Clearly. But she was smiling. I love you too. Have for weeks. Was waiting for you to catch up. How long have you known? Since you stood beside me in town when everyone was whispering. Since you helped me write those letters. Since you chose to see me as a person instead of a problem. She touched his face. Since you let me choose you back. They kissed until the dinner burned, ate it anyway laughing, spent the evening talking about everything and nothing. What happens after? Abigail asked as they cleaned up. After what? After we're married. Does anything change? Nate thought about that. I suppose you move into my room. We stop pretending we're just business partners. We build a life together. You make it sound simple. Isn't it? Nothing about us is simple. But she was smiling. I like that, though. Simple gets boring. The night before the wedding, Tom showed up with the woman from the boarding house. Her name was Ruth, and she was solid and kind and exactly the type of person who didn't care about gossip. Heard you needed a witness. I appreciate you coming, Abigail said. Appreciate being asked. Don't get many invitations these days. Ruth handed over a basket. Brought you some things for tomorrow. Flowers from my garden. Ribbon for your hair. A widow's gift to a bride. Abigail's eyes filled with tears. Thank you. No tears now. Save those for the ceremony. Ruth smiled. Though between you and me, I think you're getting a good man. Stubborn as hell, but good. I heard that, Nate called from the other room. You were meant to. They spent the evening together, the four of them. Tom told stories from the war that made Nate wince and Abigail laugh. Ruth shared gossip from town that made them all roll their eyes. Margaret Hayes is still stirring up trouble, Ruth said. Told everyone you corrupted Miss Mitchell, that this marriage is a sham to cover up sin. Let her talk, Abigail said. I stopped caring what she thinks weeks ago. Good. Woman like that feeds on fear. Don't give her any. After Tom and Ruth left, Abigail and Nate stood on the porch. Tomorrow they'd be married. Tomorrow everything would be different and exactly the same. Nervous? Abigail asked. Terrified. Me too. What are you scared of? She was quiet for a moment. That this is too good. That I'll wake up and it'll be another lie. That someone will take it away before I can believe it's real. No one's taking anything. And it's real, Abigail. Whatever else happens, this is real. Promise. Promise. They kissed goodnight and went to their separate rooms. But Nate couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about tomorrow, about vows and promises and the future they were building. Around midnight, he heard his door open. Abigail stood there in her nightgown, looking uncertain. "Can I stay with you, just to sleep? I don't want to be alone tonight." He pulled back the covers. She climbed in beside him, and they held each other in the darkness. "Still terrified," she whispered. "Yes. You. Yes. But less when I'm with you." "Me too." They fell asleep tangled together, and when Nate woke at dawn with Abigail in his arms, he felt something he hadn't felt in 10 years. Peace. The wedding was small and simple and perfect. Abigail wore her cream dress with Ruth's flowers in her hair. Nate wore his best suit, the one he'd been married in before. He'd worried that would feel wrong, but when he saw Abigail walking toward him, everything else fell away. Reverend Matthews kept it short. Asked them if they took each other. Asked them to promise to love and honor. Asked them to build a life together. "I do," Nate said when his turn came, and meant it with everything he had. "I do." Abigail said, her voice steady, despite the tears on her face. "Then by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife. Son, you may kiss your bride." Nate cupped Abigail's face in his hands and kissed her gently. This woman who'd come to him broken and desperate. This woman who'd taught him how to live again. His wife. Tom clapped him on the back. Ruth hugged Abigail. And then they were walking out of the church into the cold February afternoon as Mr. and Mrs. Carson. "How does it feel?" Abigail asked as they climbed into the wagon. "Strange, good, terrifying." He took her hand. "All of it at once." "Me too." They rode home in comfortable silence. Home to the house that was now officially theirs. Home to the life they'd chosen together. Tom and Ruth came back for dinner. Abigail had prepared a feast roast chicken, fresh bread, vegetables she'd been saving. They ate and drank and celebrated until late. "To new beginnings," Tom said, raising his glass. "To second chances," Ruth added. "To love that survives everything," Abigail said, looking at Nate. "To us," Nate finished. After Tom and Ruth left, Nate and Abigail stood in the kitchen, suddenly alone as husband and wife for the first time. "So," Abigail said. "So. This is awkward." "Little bit." She laughed. "We just got married and we don't know what to do next." "I have some ideas." "Do you now?" Nate pulled her close. "Mrs. Carson, would you like to move your things into our room?" "Our room. I like the sound of that." They moved her belongings together. It didn't take long. She still didn't have much. A few dresses, her sewing supplies, the books she'd bought in town. "That's everything," she said, looking at the small pile. "We'll get you more." "I don't need more. I have everything that matters." She turned to face him. "I have you. I have a home. I have a future I chose instead of one that was chosen for me. That's more than I ever thought I'd have." Nate thought about his first wedding night. How young he'd been. How certain. How sure that love was enough to protect them from anything. He knew better now. Knew that love wasn't armor. That tragedy could strike regardless. That promises didn't guarantee safety. But he also knew that living in fear wasn't living at all. "I'm going to try to be a good husband," he said. "But I'm going to mess up. I'm going to forget things and say the wrong things and probably drive you crazy." "I'm counting on it." Abigail moved closer. "And I'm going to be stubborn and argumentative and refuse to let you sulk when you're upset." "I don't sulk." "You absolutely sulk." "Well, you hum. Constantly. It's maddening. You love my humming. I do. God help me, I do. They laughed and the tension broke. This was them. Not perfect, not easy, but real. That night, Nate held his wife and thought about second chances, about how he'd been dead for 10 years and somehow found his way back to living, about how Abigail had walked 8 miles through a blizzard and found home at his gate. "Thank you," he whispered. "For what? For showing up, for staying, for choosing this life when you could have chosen anything else. Thank you for letting me in, for seeing me, for loving me even though you were scared." Still scared. Me too. But Nate. Yeah. I think that's okay. I think being scared means we have something worth protecting. She was right. They had something worth protecting, worth fighting for, worth choosing every single day. Outside, the Montana winter raged on, but inside, in their bed, in their home, in their marriage, there was warmth and hope and the fragile, precious beginning of forever. The morning after the wedding, Nate woke to find Abigail already up. He found her in the kitchen making coffee, wearing his shirt. "Morning, husband. Morning, wife." He liked the sound of that. "Sleep well." "Better than I have in years." She poured him coffee. "What's the plan for today?" "Same as always. Animals need feeding. Fences need checking. Normal work. Except nothing's normal anymore." "No, it's better." They worked together that day. Abigail insisted on coming to the barn, helping with chores she'd never done before. She was clumsy at first, but determined. "You don't have to do this. I want to. We're partners now. Remember? That means sharing everything, even the barn work." Nate watched her struggle with a water bucket and felt his chest tighten with affection. This woman who refused to be helpless, who demanded to be useful even when she didn't know how. "Here." He moved behind her, putting his hands over hers. "Like this. Let the bucket do the work." She leaned back against him. "I like this. Working together." "Me too." They spent the afternoon that way, finding their rhythm, learning how to be married people instead of just two individuals sharing space. That evening, Abigail brought up something she'd been thinking about. "I want to keep working, the seamstress business." "Of course. Why would you stop?" "Some men expect their wives to." "I'm not some men. You built that business yourself. It's yours." He took her hand. "Abigail, I didn't marry you to control you. I married you because I love who you are. All of you. Including the stubborn seamstress who won't quit." She kissed him. "I love you. Love you too." But that night, as they lay in bed, Abigail brought up something harder. "What if I can't have children?" Nate turned to face her. "What makes you think that?" "I was married to Thomas for 3 years. We wanted children. It never happened." Her voice was small. "What if I can't give you that? Then we don't have children." "But, Abigail, I already lost a child. The thought of having another one terrifies me. And the thought of you dying in childbirth terrifies me even more." He pulled her closer. "If we have children, wonderful. If we don't, we'll have each other. That's enough." "You mean that?" "I mean it." She relaxed against him. "I was so worried I'd what? Leave you, stop loving you." Nate kissed her forehead. "I chose you. Not the idea of you. Not what you could give me. You. Just as you are." They held each other in the darkness, and Nate realized something. He'd spent 10 years frozen in the past, grieving what he'd lost, refusing to move forward. But Abigail had taught him something Margaret never could. That moving forward didn't mean forgetting, that loving again didn't diminish what came before, that the heart was big enough to hold both grief and joy. "Nate." "Yeah. I'm happy." Right now in this moment, I'm completely happy. Me too. And it was true. For the first time in 10 years, Nathaniel Carson was happy. Not because the pain was gone, not because he'd forgotten Margaret and James, not because he wasn't still scared of losing everything again, but because he'd chosen to live anyway, to love anyway, to hope anyway. And that made all the difference. The first month of marriage brought challenges neither of them expected. Not the big dramatic kind, but the small everyday friction of two people learning to share a life. Nate liked his coffee black and strong. Abigail liked hers with cream and sugar. He woke at dawn without fail. She preferred to sleep until the sun was fully up. He was methodical, planning everything. She was impulsive, following instinct. You moved my tools again. I was cleaning. They were in the way. They were exactly where I needed them. In the middle of the kitchen floor. I was working on the table leg, needed them close. Abigail set down her sewing with more force than necessary. Then tell me when you're working on something so I don't clean around it. I shouldn't have to announce every time I fix something in my own house. Our house. The words hung between them. Nate realized what he'd said. You're right. Our house. I'm sorry. She softened. I'm sorry too. I'm not used to sharing space. Keep forgetting someone else has routines. We'll figure it out. Will we? Or will we just keep stepping on each other until one of us breaks? Nate crossed to where she sat and knelt beside her chair. We'll figure it out. Even if it takes years. Even if we drive each other crazy in the process. You promise? I promise. But the fights kept coming. Small things that shouldn't matter but somehow did. The way she hung laundry. The way he left his boots by the door. How she hummed while he was trying to think. How he went quiet when he was upset instead of talking. I can't read your mind, Nate. I'm not asking you to. Then talk to me. Tell me what's wrong instead of brooding. I'm not brooding. You've been staring at that fence post for 20 minutes. That's brooding. He wanted to argue, but she was right. I got a letter today, from the territorial office, about the agency. Abigail went still. What did it say? They arrested 3 people, the owners and their partner in St. Louis. Your letters helped build the case. He turned to face her. They want you to testify, if it goes to trial. Testify in front of a court, in front of a judge and jury, maybe more. They want to make an example of these people, stop this from happening to other women. Abigail sat down hard. I don't know if I can do that. You don't have to. They said it's voluntary. But if I don't, they might get away with it, might keep doing this to other women. Her hands shook. God, Nate, what if I mess it up? What if I say the wrong thing and they go free? He moved to sit beside her. What if you say exactly the right thing and they go to prison? What if your voice is what saves the next woman from what you went through? That's a lot of pressure. I know. And if you decide you can't do it, I'll support that. But Abigail. He took her hand. You're the bravest person I know. If anyone can stand up there and tell the truth, it's you. She was quiet for a long time. Will you come with me if I go? Every step of the way. Then I'll do it. I'll testify. The trial was set for late April in Helena. That gave them 2 months to prepare. 2 months of Abigail practicing her testimony with Nate, getting the story straight, learning how to stay calm under pressure. What if they ask about us, about our arrangement? Then you tell the truth, that I hired you, that we fell in love, that we're married now. What if they say I'm not credible because I'm married to you? Then they're idiots. Your marital status doesn't change what happened to you. But Nate could see her worry, could see the fear that people would twist her story, make her out to be something she wasn't. Abigail, listen to me. You're a victim who became a survivor, who became a fighter. Anyone who can't see that isn't worth worrying about. When did you get so good with words? When I married a woman who demands honesty. She smiled despite her nerves. I do, don't I? You do, and I love you for it. March brought an unexpected visitor. Nate was in the barn when he heard a horse approaching. He came out to find a woman dismounting, middle-aged and well-dressed. "Can I help you?" "I'm looking for Abigail Carson. I was told she lives here." "She does. May I ask who's calling?" "My name is Elizabeth Patterson. I run the Women's Advocacy Society in Chicago. I've been corresponding with your wife about the mail-order bride fraud case." Nate felt his protective instincts rise. "She's inside. I'll get her." Abigail came out wiping her hands on her apron. When she saw Elizabeth, her face lit up. "Mrs. Patterson, I didn't know you were coming." "Forgive the surprise. I was in Denver on other business and thought I'd stop by. Your letters have been extraordinarily helpful to our work." Elizabeth glanced at Nate. "May we speak privately? Anything you need to say to me, you can say in front of my husband." Elizabeth smiled. "Good, I was hoping you'd say that. Mr. Carson, your wife is quite remarkable. Her testimony is going to help us shut down not just this agency, but others like it across the country." "I know she's remarkable." "Then you also know she's taking a significant risk. Speaking publicly about this will make her a target. People don't like it when women challenge the system." "I can handle it," Abigail said. "I'm sure you can. But I wanted to warn you both. This could get ugly. They'll try to discredit you, dig into your past, make you out to be a liar or worse." Nate felt rage building. "Let them try. That's the spirit. But Mrs. Carson, I need to know you're prepared. They'll ask about your first husband, your work history, your living arrangements before marriage. They'll make it sound sordid, even when it wasn't." "I have nothing to hide." "Good, because they'll try to find something anyway." Elizabeth pulled out a folder. "I've prepared some questions they're likely to ask. Practice with these. Get comfortable with the answers. And remember, the truth is your strongest weapon." After Elizabeth left, Abigail was quiet. "You all right?" "I'm scared. She's right, this could get ugly. What if people here find out? What if they—" "Then they find out. Abigail, you're doing the right thing. Whatever happens, we face it together." "You keep saying that." "Because I keep meaning it." She leaned against him. "I don't deserve you." "You deserve everything. You just forgot for a while." They practiced the questions every night. Nate would ask, Abigail would answer, and slowly she got better at staying calm, at telling her story without breaking down. "Why did you believe the letter was real?" "Because I wanted to. Because I was desperate for a way out, and it seemed like Providence." "Did you know Mr. Carson before you arrived?" "No. I'd never heard of him until I saw his name on the letter." "And yet you married him within months. Doesn't that seem convenient?" "Love isn't convenient. It's complicated and messy and terrifying. But it's real." Nate watched her grow stronger with each practice session. Watched her transform from a woman who'd been invisible her whole life into someone who refused to be silenced. "You're going to change things," he said one night. "I'm just telling the truth." That's how you change things. April came with warming weather and budding trees. The trial was set for the 20th. They'd leave on the 15th to give themselves time to get to Helena. The night before they left, Tom and Ruth came to dinner. "You're doing a brave thing," Ruth said to Abigail. "Or a stupid thing. Haven't decided which yet." "Brave. Definitely brave." Ruth squeezed her hand. "And we'll be here when you get back, no matter what happens." "Thank you. That means more than you know." Tom pulled Nate aside while the women talked. "You sure about this? Taking her into that mess?" "She's the one going. I'm just supporting her." "Still, trial like this, people get nasty. They'll say things about her. About both of you. Let them. We know the truth." Tom studied him. "You really love her, don't you?" "More than I thought possible." "Good, because she's going to need that when things get hard." The journey to Helena took 3 days by stage. Abigail was quiet most of the trip, rehearsing her testimony in her head. "Stop thinking so loud," Nate said. "Can't help it." "Yes, you can. Look out the window. Watch the mountains. Be here with me instead of in your head." She tried, but he could see the fear building. The night before the trial, they stayed in a hotel in Helena. Abigail couldn't eat dinner, could barely sleep. What if I freeze up there? What if I can't speak? Then you take a breath and start again. What if they don't believe me? Then they're fools. But Abigail, the evidence is there. Your letter. The forged signature. The testimony from other women. Your voice is just the final piece. But it's the piece that matters, the one that makes it real. Then make it real. Tell them what happened. Tell them how it felt. Tell them why it matters. She nodded, but he could see she was still terrified. The courtroom was packed. Nate sat in the front row where Abigail could see him. Elizabeth Patterson sat beside him along with 3 other women who'd been defrauded by the same agency. When they called Abigail to the stand, she stood on shaking legs, walked to the front with her head up, placed her hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth. The prosecutor started gentle. Easy questions about her background, her first marriage, how she came to contact the agency. "And what did they tell you about Mr. Carson?" "That he was a widower, a rancher in Montana, that he'd paid for my passage and was expecting me." "But that wasn't true." "No, he'd never heard of me, never written to any agency. Someone had forged his name." "What happened when you arrived?" "I walked 8 miles through a blizzard with a head wound from being robbed. When I got to his gate, I collapsed. He found me and took me in." Out of kindness. Out of basic human decency. He didn't know me, didn't owe me anything, but he helped me anyway. The prosecutor nodded. "And now you're married to Mr. Carson. Some might say that's convenient." Abigail's spine straightened. "Some might say I'm lucky, that I found a good man who treated me with respect, who saw me as a person instead of a problem, who gave me the choice to stay or go and supported whatever I decided." She looked directly at the jury. "But convenient, no. Nothing about this has been convenient. It's been hard and scary and uncertain, but it's been real, and that's more than the agency ever offered me." The defense attorney was harsher. He questioned her motives, her character, her choices. "Isn't it true you were desperate?" "Yes." "Desperate enough to lie." "I didn't lie. The agency lied." "But you believed the lie, chose to believe it. Doesn't that make you complicit?" "No. It makes me a victim. There's a difference. You claim to be a victim, yet you ended up married to a wealthy rancher. Seems you made out quite well." Abigail's hands clenched on the rail. "I ended up married to a man who lost his wife and son 10 years ago and spent a decade alone because he was terrified of loving again. A man who took a chance on a stranger because he remembered what it felt like to need help. A man who—" Her voice broke. "A man who saved my life. Not by marrying me, but by seeing me as worth saving. So yes, I made out well. But not because I schemed or lied. Because I survived. And I'm not going to apologize for that." The courtroom was silent. The defense attorney tried a few more questions, but Abigail held firm. When they finally dismissed her, she walked back to her seat with her head high. Nate took her hand. "You did it." "Did I help?" "You were perfect." The trial lasted 3 more days. Other women testified. Evidence was presented. The defense tried to paint the agency as legitimate, the victims as opportunists. But in the end, the jury took less than 2 hours to reach a verdict. Guilty on all counts. The courtroom erupted. Abigail collapsed against Nate, sobbing with relief. "It's over. It's finally over." "You did that. Your voice did that." Elizabeth found them after. "You were magnificent. Absolutely magnificent." The jury believed every word. What happens now? Now they go to prison, And we use this case to push for regulations, protections for women, real consequences for fraud. She squeezed Abigail's hands. You started something today, something important. On the journey home, Abigail was quiet in a different way, not scared, thoughtful. What are you thinking about? How many women are still out there, still trapped, still desperate? She turned to Nate. I want to do more. I want to help them. How? I don't know yet, but Elizabeth said the society needs people who've been through it. People who understand. Maybe I could... She paused. Maybe I could write about it, tell my story, help other women see they have options. You want to be a writer? I want to be useful. And if my words can help someone the way they helped in that courtroom, then yes, I want to write. Nate pulled her close. Then write. I'll support you however you need. Even if it means people knowing our business. Our business is that we love each other. That we built something real from broken pieces. If sharing that helps someone else, then share it. They got back to the ranch in late April. The snow had melted, revealing green grass and early wildflowers. The house looked different somehow, warmer, more alive. It's good to be home, Abigail said. It is. Tom and Ruth were waiting on the porch. Well? Tom demanded. Guilty. All three of them. Abigail grinned. And I didn't freeze up or mess up or anything. Ruth hugged her. I knew you wouldn't. You're stronger than you think. I'm learning that. They celebrated that night. Ate too much, drank too much, laughed until their sides hurt. And when Tom and Ruth left, Nate and Abigail stood on the porch watching the stars. Thank you, Abigail said. For what? For believing in me when I didn't believe in myself. For standing beside me even when it was hard. For... She stopped. For loving me. That's the easy part. Is it? Loving you is the easiest thing I've ever done. Everything else is work. But loving you, that's effortless. She kissed him. I love you too. So much it scares me sometimes. Me too. Think we'll always be scared? Probably. But I think we'll be happy too. And that makes it worth it. Summer brought change. Abigail started writing in earnest, chronicling her journey for Elizabeth's advocacy newsletter. Her words reached women across the country, and letters started arriving. Women thanking her, women asking for advice, women sharing their own stories. Listen to this one, Abigail said one evening. Dear Mrs. Carson, your story gave me the courage to leave my situation. I thought I had no options, but you showed me I did. Thank you for speaking up. You're helping people. We're helping people. None of this would have happened if you hadn't taken me in. And none of it would have happened if you hadn't been brave enough to speak up. They worked together that summer. Nate on the ranch, Abigail on her writing, and seamstress business. They fought sometimes, made up, learned each other's edges and soft spots. By August, Abigail noticed she was late, then sick in the mornings, then sure. Nate? He looked up from his dinner. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. She took a breath. I'm pregnant. The fork fell from his hand. You're sure? As sure as I can be without a doctor. He stood, sat back down, stood again. How do you feel? Terrified, happy, sick, all of it at once. She watched his face. How do you feel? The same. God, Abigail. A baby. I know you're scared. After what happened to... I'm terrified, but I'm also... He crossed to her and placed his hand on her still flat stomach. I'm hopeful. Is that allowed? It's required. They held each other in the kitchen while the sun set outside their window. Two broken people who'd found each other. Who'd built a life from mistakes and second chances. Who were about to bring new life into the world. What if something goes wrong? Nate whispered. Then we face it together. But Nate, what if something goes right? What if we get to meet our child? What if we get to be a family? What if we do? The pregnancy was hard. Abigail was sick for months, weak and exhausted. Nate hovered terrified every time she coughed or stumbled. "I'm fine." "You're pale." "I'm pregnant. It's normal." "How do you know what's normal?" "Because Ruth told me, and the doctor told me, and every other woman who's been through this told me." She took his hand. "You need to calm down, or you're going to wear a hole in the floor. I can't lose you." "You're not going to lose me. I'm strong, Nate. Stronger than I look." "I know. But, no buts. We're doing this. We're having this baby. And we're both going to survive." He wanted to believe her. Tried to. But every day brought new fears. Ruth helped. She'd delivered babies before and promised to be there when the time came. She taught Nate what to watch for what was normal and what wasn't. "She's healthy. The baby's healthy. Stop worrying." "I can't." "Then worry quieter. You're making her nervous." By December, Abigail was huge and uncomfortable and ready to be done. "This baby needs to come out." "Not yet. Doctor said another week at least." "The doctor isn't carrying a person inside him." "Fair point." She went into labor on a Tuesday morning. Nate immediately panicked. "I'll get Ruth, and the doctor, and—" "Nate, breathe." "I'm breathing." "No, you're hyperventilating. Sit down before you pass out." He sat. Abigail timed her contractions calm and methodical even as pain crossed her face. "It's going to be hours yet. Maybe days. Go get Ruth, but don't panic. This is normal." Ruth arrived within the hour. The doctor came after. And then they waited. Labor was long and hard. Nate paced outside the room listening to Abigail's cries and feeling helpless. Tom showed up at some point. "Heard it was happening." "She's been in there for hours." "That's normal." "How would you know?" "I don't, but Ruth said it is and she knows what she's talking about." More hours passed. Night fell. Nate's fear grew with every cry he heard. Then silence. Terrible, complete silence. Nate was at the door when he heard it. A baby crying, loud and angry and alive. Ruth appeared smiling. "You have a daughter, and your wife wants you." He burst into the room. Abigail was propped up in bed, exhausted and sweaty, and holding a tiny bundle. "Nate, come meet your daughter." He crossed to them on shaking legs, looked down at the tiny face, red and wrinkled and perfect. "She's beautiful." "She is. She's ours." Abigail's eyes filled with tears. "We did it, Nate. We made it through." He kissed her forehead. "You did it. You're the strongest person I've ever known." "We both did it. You and me. Together." Their daughter. They named her Margaret Ruth, honoring the women who'd shaped them, was healthy and loud and demanding. She had Abigail's dark hair and Nate's stubborn chin. "She's going to be trouble," Tom said, holding her awkwardly. "Good. The world needs more troublemakers," Abigail replied. Those first weeks were exhausting. The baby cried constantly. Neither of them slept. Abigail struggled with feeding. Nate worried about everything. But they survived. Figured it out one day at a time. One night, Nate woke to find Abigail gone. He found her in the nursery, rocking the baby and crying. "What's wrong?" "Nothing. I'm just—" She wiped her eyes. "I'm happy. I have a daughter. I have you. I have a home. And I keep waiting for it to be taken away." Nate knelt beside the rocking chair. "It's not going to be taken away." "You can't promise that." "No. But I can promise that whatever comes, we face it together. And I can promise that right now, in this moment, we're safe. We're loved. We're whole." Abigail looked down at their sleeping daughter. "I never thought I'd have this. After Thomas died, after years of being invisible, I thought this kind of happiness was for other people. So did I. And we were both wrong." Spring came again. A year since Abigail had first arrived at his gate. A year since she'd collapsed in the snow and changed everything. They stood at that same gate one evening, Margaret sleeping against Nate's chest. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if I hadn't come here?" Abigail asked. "Sometimes. I think I'd still be alone. Still empty. Still just surviving instead of living. I think I'd be dead. Or worse." She leaned against him. "That forged letter was the worst thing that happened to me. And the best thing. Both at once. Second chances are like that. Messy and complicated and absolutely necessary. You think we get more than one second chance? I think we get as many as we need, as long as we're brave enough to take them." They watched the sun set over the mountains they'd both learned to call home. Two people who'd been broken in different ways finding wholeness together. Building a life from fragments and faith and the stubborn refusal to give up. "I love you," Abigail said. "I love you too." Their daughter stirred against his chest. Their house glowed warm behind them. And Nathaniel Carson, who'd thought his heart had died in a fire 10 years ago, felt it beating strong and steady and alive. They'd stumbled into this, both of them desperate and damaged and terrified. But they'd chosen to stay, chosen to try, chosen to love, even when it was scary. And that choice, that brave, terrifying, beautiful choice, had saved them both.